So, in this lesson, we're looking at the migration of Black Americans from the South, and generally the rural South, to cities in the South, but more so cities in the North. In order to do this, we're going to look specifically at one city, Newark, New Jersey. And just use it as like a case study of the forces that pushed African Americans out of the South, but also pulled them to the North. So before we look at the push and pull in this lesson, I just want to kind of remind you of some context, some historical context for this. Most of this you've already learned, so this is a reminder, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. So first of all, disenfranchisement. In the late 1860s, black men in the South could vote for the first time. More than 1,500 African Americans were elected to office from 1865 to 1876. But beginning in the late 1860s, white Southern vigilante groups, most well known as the Ku Klux Klan, used violence and intimidation to keep black Southerners from voting. And they also, like we've learned about, used poll taxes and literacy tests and things like that to keep black men from voting. Also in the South, and we haven't really talked about this, but in the South, after the emancipation, previously enslaved African Americans sought employment, and most plantation owners wanted cheap labor. There were laws that kept African Americans in the South from most occupations other than working on farms or plantations. So sharecropping became the dominant economic system in Southern agriculture. And in sharecropping, landowners sign agreements with farmers to work the land in exchange for a share of the harvested crop. So landowners or local merchants would sell or lease farming supplies like seeds, fertilizer, and farming tools to sharecroppers on credit. Sharecroppers would then repay the landowners after the crops were harvested. The problem is the high interest rates, unfair contracts, unpredictable harvests, all that stuff led to sharecroppers usually becoming deeply indebted to landowners. Laws made it difficult for sharecroppers to sell their crops in the open market and prevented them from moving if they were in debt. So approximately 2/3 of sharecroppers were white and 1/3 were African American. Also, and we did learn about this, Jim Crow laws in the South. So after Reconstruction, once the U.S. soldiers left the South, and with African Americans not being able to vote in local and federal elections, states were able to pass laws that created segregation. These laws required blacks to use separate public facilities, and the laws were even supported by the Supreme Court. So in Plessy versus Ferguson, we learned the Supreme Court upheld segregation laws and established the doctrine of separate but equal. In reality, the different accommodations or the different spaces for whites and blacks were not equal. So it was separate and not equal with Jim Crow laws. Also, and we learned about this, there was lynching going on in the South. It was going on everywhere, but predominantly in the South, and mostly of black Southerners. So it's difficult to track how many people were lynched because there generally weren't official records. Estimates range anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 people in the time after Reconstruction. Lynchings, usually they were falsely accused of committing crimes, sometimes even minor offenses like trying to vote or testifying against a white person or bumping into a white person. And these were pretty popular. You can see from this photo, like crowds would show up to watch, sold postcards, sold souvenirs, things like that. So here's a slide that shows the distribution of the population of Black Americans in 1900. So this is before the Great Migration. So you can see clearly they're kind of concentrated in the South. This began to change with the Great Migration. So in 1910, like you saw on that map, 90% of all African Americans lived in the South, and that was mostly on farms. And then during World War I, 500,000 African Americans moved from the South to northern cities. And then during the 1920s, this continued. 800,000 blacks moved from southern states to northern cities. So then if we're looking specifically at Newark during this time frame, and it's hard to see the dates, but this is 1870 to 1920, so it kind of spans the time that we're talking about. Population is obviously increasing. It increases a little bit more dramatically from 1890 up into 1920. And then this slide shows the population of African Americans in Newark. So again, generally increasing, but then increases dramatically during World War I. So this World War I is happening between 1910 and 1920. So a pretty dramatic increase there. What we're going to look at today, or when you look at the documents in today's lesson, you'll be trying to understand why African Americans migrated from Newark, or migrated to Newark at the beginning of the 20th century. And that will kind of stand in for just generally why were they migrating from the South to the North.